Hi guys, welcome back to yet another fun wait a minute, nope, this is a Q&A video here about good old Athena. There might be a tiny bit of DIY in the very end of this video, but we'll see how today goes. This is a pre-recorded video. Right now I am visiting my lovely fiance in warm, sunny Los Angeles. I recorded this video right before leaving. And it looks like I'm getting out of Dodge just in time because this weird white stuff has started forming on top of Athena. There won't be a new video next weekend, but the weekend after that, I should be back here aboard Athena working on the technical compartment and the new head. I'm leaving for the airport in about 8 hours, but before leaving, I would like to just tidy up the boat a little bit to not have it be a giant mess when I get back to Denmark. Right now, this is what the aft cabin looks like. The future head is also a ginormous mess, as is the galley, but all of that pales in comparison to the forward cabin. Yep, I sure did a good job messing that up. While I'm tidying up, I want to answer a few questions from you guys, so let's dive right into the first question. Are all Warrior 38s built that badly, or is it just yours? Well, let's give you guys a few examples of what I think this question is referring to. When I rebuilt the deck, which we'll get back to why I did that in just a few minutes, but when I rebuilt the deck, there was a big gaping hole near the transom. I don't think that was a part of the original design. Then there's the matter of the deck hole joint, which here aboard Athena leaks into the plywood bulkheads, which just seems very stupid. Then was the fact that the limber holes on the starboard side were glassed over, meaning water couldn't get out of some of the compartments, so there was standing water in there for 10-30 years. Then there was the plywood around the windlass that was completely exposed to seawater, which also I think was a big part of why the deck decided to just die on me. Then there's a bunch of minor nitpicking things, like for instance over here, the teak profile that was used here for trim has a rounded top, whereas this one has a flat top. That is just weird. I think the issues I've found here about Athena are not issues with the design, but rather quality issues from the yard that built her. So I don't know if these issues are also found in other Warrior 38s and 40s. I haven't had a close look at any one of those, but that would be fun to do at some point in the future. So if you want to buy a Warrior 38 or 40, I would definitely go over it with a fine-tooth comb, unless you want a DIY project. Having said that, a lot of older boats have some design kinks that are starting to show themselves. Like for instance the Alvin Ballad, the type of boat I'm living aboard, those have a mild steel mast step truss, and in some of them over the years a bit of water have seeped in there, the mast step truss has started expanding, and in a few of them that has actually cracked the front of the keel. That's not really a great design either, but yeah, you'll find stuff like that with most older boats. And that is an excellent segue into the next question. Given all that you know about Athena, would you still buy it today? For me, that is going to have to be a yes. I know that sounds weird to a lot of people, but for me, I got exactly what I wanted. I wanted a project boat, something I could work on, and well, I just kind of fell in love with Athena. Sure, there's a lot of work, but I enjoy what I'm doing. Could I have found a boat that was in better condition? Sure. Now, would I still have ended up doing a somewhat extensive refit? I'm pretty sure I would, because like I've said before, this has always been my dream, to fix up an old boat and then go cruising. If we engage hindsight mode and look back, a lot of amazing things have happened in my life because I purchased Athena. For instance, I'm not sure I would have met Ava, my fiance, if I hadn't purchased Athena. Ava's brother-in-law, Julian, watches the videos, and if I hadn't been doing videos here about Athena, I'm not sure that I would have been putting up videos, which means she would never have met me, and well, that would just have been really sad. And just in general, a lot of really good things have happened in my life because of the videos I put up on YouTube, and I'm able to put up those videos because of the, well, condition of Athena. The next question is, how do you figure out the number of layers of fiberglass? Well, in a DIY refit like the one I'm doing here, Just common sense and overkill goes a long way. Sure, everything can be calculated and simulated to find the least amount of glass you can lay up where everything is still strong enough. Like for instance, there was an awesome structural engineer that helped me with some simulations on the structural members underneath the cabin sole when I wanted to reinforce those. But for tabbing and glassing in place the new knees, I choose a much more common sense approach. If you take a look at the knee here behind me, when I glassed in the new core, I looked at the old laminate that was covering it, which is this piece right here. I measured the thickness, and then I laid up the same thickness of laminate in BX and epoxy rather than chop strand and polyester. That is where overkill comes into the equation. Polyester and chop strand is nowhere near as strong as BX and epoxy. So by laying up the same thickness, I know that the new knee is way stronger than the old one. I mean, I haven't saved any weight, but I'm not concerned about weight here aboard Athena. To figure out how many layers of fiberglass to lay up, which I think might actually be what the question was asking, but to figure out the number of layers, a few years ago I made a little test sample where I laid up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers of 600 gram BX, which is what I'm typically using here aboard Athena. I consolidated that as best as I possibly could, let it cure, and then measured the thickness, and that's what I've used as a gauge ever since. Using that approach of replacing like for like will get you a very long way through a refit like the one I'm doing here aboard Athena. Say you need to replace a bulkhead that's 12mm plywood. If you just replace it with 12mm plywood and you take care and do a good job, well, then you should be golden. The next question is, how are you planning to finish the interior and cabin sole plywood? So what am I going to do to finish this surface and also the cabin sole, which I'm sitting on top of here? Let's start with the easy one. All of the plywood that's tabbed to the rest of the boat is going to get an outer veneer of 4 to 6mm thick plywood that's going to cover all of these seams, and then that is going to get painted, which will leave me with a completely flat and nicely painted surface. I'm not going to bother doing that in places like in here because that's going to get covered up by the back of the settee, but all of the areas where you can see the plywood is going to get covered in that outer veneer plywood. The second part of the question is a lot harder to answer because I don't know. What you're seeing here, this plywood, is just the subfloor. There's going to be something decorative on top of this. I just don't know what that is going to be yet. It could be a traditional finish, meaning teak and holly. It could also be a different kind of hardwood, or it could be some kind of a synthetic material like maybe vinyl or, well, anything basically. I don't know yet. The next question is, what kind of ply are you using for the interior and what thickness? Well, this is 12mm Ukume plywood. It is an exterior grade plywood. It is VPB glued. I see a lot of people on the internet yelling and screaming about marine grade plywood, but for something like this, for bulkheads and stuff like that, you don't need to use marine grade plywood. Now, don't go using OSB or something like that for structural things aboard your boat. That is not what I'm advocating here. What I'm saying is the label on your plywood, whether it's marine grade or not, is less important than the actual quality of the plywood. Let's say you live somewhere, like for instance here in Denmark, where you can't really get marine grade plywood, or where you can get some that claims to be marine grade plywood, but then it's made here in Denmark, which makes it horrendously expensive. We're talking over $1,000 per sheet. Well, then I think you should take a long, hard look at exterior grade plywood. The stuff I'm using here aboard Athena is the exact same plywood that X-Yacht is using aboard their boats, only theirs has a nicer outer veneer on it, but it's from the same distributor, or at least that was the case in 2012 when I checked. On the other hand, if you live somewhere where you can get plywood that's sold as marine grade without it costing an arm and a leg, I think I'm paying a little over $100 per sheet for this stuff, well, then go ahead and use it. It's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine because you see people claiming that you must use marine grade plywood, and that's simply just not the case. Like I said, in my opinion, it is the actual quality of the plywood that is important. That is what you should look at, and that is what you should take into consideration, not whether or not it is labeled as marine grade. a good quality plywood that's VPP glued will be perfectly fine for the vast majority of the stuff inside of a boat. The next question is, what is peel ply and why do you use it? Well, let me just clear out the mess here in the aft cabin and then we'll take a look at some peel ply. Ta-da! You can actually see the bunk again. That is certainly a step in the right direction. This right here is peel ply. It's applied on top of laminate. In this case, it's applied on top of the laminate that's joining these two pieces of plywood together. It feels kind of like the lining inside of certain jackets. Peel ply can be a blessing and a curse. If applied correctly, it can save you from a lot of sanding, and also if you're using West Systems 105, then any amine blush that forms is going to form on the outside of the peel ply, so when you remove the peel ply, well, then the amine blush is going to go with the peel ply and you won't have to prep the surface. But if peel ply is not applied properly, meaning if there are little air bubbles between the peel ply and the laminate, well then you're in for a bunch of sanding. The peel ply I've applied here, this is a nice flat surface, so it doesn't have any issues, so I can't really show you what happens, but a little crater forms and then you have to sand out that, and it's really annoying. And the thing is, when you apply peel ply to surfaces that are not flat, if they're curved or if they have a lot of shape to them, this stuff, it doesn't conform to shapes. It's not very nice to work with, except for on flat surfaces. When it comes time to apply the outer veneer plywood to this bulkhead, all I'll have to do is just to rip off the plywood and the surface will be prepped and ready. If I hadn't used peel ply, I'd have had to wash the amine blush off of the surface and then key the laminate, being sanded, and then I could put up the outer veneer plywood. So yeah, I've had good luck with peel ply on flat surfaces. Curved surfaces, not so much. Just like that, the head is all tidied up and ready for me to resume work when I get back to Denmark. I think I've got time to answer a couple more questions before I cram today's harvest in the back of my car and head up to the recycling center. So what are the books you recommend to read to get up to date with glassing, GRP, boat building and interior building? I don't really know of any book I can recommend that covers those topics. There is one book I would recommend for DIY boat stuff, and that is Boatowners Mechanical and Electrical Manual. That is an awesome book. I don't know if it covers those topics though, but there are a lot of great resources on the internet. There are some great forums. I'll leave a link for those down below. There's also Andy's channel, Boatworks Today, and yeah, I think that about covers it. This next one kind of made me chuckle. Is Cementwork Guy still sweeping his mess under your workbench? Lol. I assume so. That type of character defect doesn't just correct itself overnight. I mean, I did the exact same thing, so I shouldn't throw the first stone there. But yeah, we have actually moved to a new and slightly bigger workshop, and I'm sure you guys will see that at some point this winter. Are you considering any freshwater adventures in Athena in the Great Lakes? Well, that could very well end up happening. Ava's parents are from Michigan and it would be very cool to swing by there and say hello to them. And it could also fit very nicely into our 5-year plan. So for now, the plan is to leave Denmark in 1 year, 6 months and 3 weeks. And then over the course of 1.5 years, we'll make our way to the east coast of the US. And for now, at least, the plan is for us to hunker down in the US for a little bit for me to sort out my citizenship. And while we're there, we could do the Great Loop, or we could settle down somewhere for Ava to figure out her PhD situation, or we could cruise the Great Lakes. We'll see what happens. After having gone so far beyond any normal refit, do you in hindsight feel like you would have liked to have constructed the boat from the drawing board up? Well, I mean, not really, because like I've mentioned, my dream has always been to refit an old boat and then go sailing in that boat. That's not to say I wouldn't like to build a boat from scratch at some point. That would be amazing. But yeah, I think it is a lot easier to do even an extensive refit like the one I'm doing here aboard Athena. Would you look at that? The boat is actually semi-tidy now, although that is more than you can say about the outside. By the outside, I mean down here on the ground. As you can see, it is a giant mess. And that's an excellent segue into the last question, and that is, how do you get rid of all of your waste or trash? And well, all of this goes into my car. Up at the recycling center, everything goes into separate containers. So in the bottom here, I'm going to put the cardboard because that's one separate container. On top of this, I'm going to put all the wood because that's another container. That's all of the wood, and here's some fiberglass, that's another separate container, and for instance plastic is also a separate container. After a couple of runs to the recycling center, everything is now all nice and tidy. I had hoped I could finish this video by applying the first coat of Sigma Duo 520 in the technical compartment, but I am out of time. I need to head over and grab a shower and get going. So yeah, that is going to be the end of this video. I'll be back in 2 weeks. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!